object paths due to the differences in domain layouts. At this point, I will demonstrate how to create a single user, OU, and group in the Active Directory Administrator Center. Turn mouse on. Okay. We are in the Leewood. We're going to use a Leewood site for an example this morning. New organizational unit. We will create the department first. Leewood for site, IT department. And management for the job role. I apologize. Within this group, or within this OU, we'll create a group. As I said, we're using the global groups. Once again, it'll be need to designate the site, the job, and the role. And once in there, we can also create a user. I'm just going to name him first, last name of last. As you can see, manually inputting users and OUs. You can make lots of errors. So now that you have seen how to create OUs, groups, and users singly, I'll have Gary come up and show how to do the rest of the domain in a much more effective manner.
Good morning, my name is Gary, and I will be presenting to you how we accomplished exactly what Kurt just did, but 400 times and in half the amount of time. As you can see, our OU structure is very detailed and intricate, and there are various ways that you can input an OU structure into a domain, and one of which is by way of the GUI, which is usually going to be the easiest form to do so. Unfortunately for that, the GUI is best used for adding users or groups or anything individually. Otherwise, it can be very time consuming. So we chose to use DSAdd and PowerShell. Both methods use scripts and or batch files to add bulk amounts of objects to a domain or even forests. So as you can see up here, the main difference that we're going to have between DSAdd and PowerShell is mainly going to be the verbiage in the command, as well as PowerShell is going to have a little more reach and complexity with its command later on in the we chose to use DSAdd on our Alpha network and PowerShell on our Omega network, mainly because the PowerShell is going to be geared a little bit more towards the future, which everybody is seeming to want to use in the future as well. And for demonstration purposes, we're going to show the script running on our Alpha network here. And as you can see, we have each individual location with groups and users all added in less than 20 seconds. So now that we have our OU structure built, Scott will come up here and present ways to utilize the OU structure and its files across the server. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. My name is Scott Taylor, and now that we have our users ready, we need to be able to give them access to their files and folders. We will start with a few software RAID configurations for fault tolerance. In option Alpha, we had RAID 1 for the operating systems for all 3 of our servers, as well as RAID 5 for the data drive in our member server. In option Omega, we had a RAID 1 for all the operating systems, as well as RAID 5 on our file server and our second member server. DFS, or Distributed File System, is a service run on servers to provide a single access point called a namespace for multiple shared folders across the network. For example, if you had 10 shared folders, rather than having to map those individually, you could add them to the namespace and just map that. In option Alpha, DFS was installed on our member server as a standalone namespace that does not provide fault tolerance. In option Omega, we installed DFS on our file server and our second member server to take advantage of a domain-based namespace, which will allow us to replicate the DFS shares to the other server for fault tolerance. We will also be utilizing folder redirection for the documents folder to be stored on our servers rather than on the local user computers. On that note, I will hand you off to Miranda, who will go into more depth for GPOs and quotas.
Hello, my name is Miranda Archuleta, and I'm here to explain group policy objects, or GPOs, and how we implemented them both on the Alpha and the Omega networks the same. Group policy controls the working environment of users and computer accounts. It provides the centralized management and configuration of operating systems, applications, and user settings in an Active Directory environment. The main idea of GPOs is to secure your network from your end users and to promote productivity for them as well. As Kurt mentioned earlier, you can implement GPOs to be very specific and fine-grained. We have implemented, as you can see, the password policy setting and the default domain policy. This is to prompt users to create complex passwords and to change their password every 30 days. It also has an account lockout threshold of up to 6 failed attempts to log in. We block the use of the control panel and the taskbar and remote desktop connections to keep users from altering their settings or someone else's. Now for the IT department, we needed to block the inheritance of all of the GPOs that have been applied at the domain level above it, so they still have the access to the system's controls needed to perform their jobs. Blocking the inheritance prevents the GPO from applying to the selected OU. Now, in order to keep the IT department with some of those policies, like the screensaver and folder redirection, without having to individually apply the GPO to every OU other than the IT department, we enforced these policies so that it would still apply to all of the users. We also set GPO quotas for each newly added standard user of 3 gigabytes of storage per user. This will manage the amount of storage used by each employee to reduce costs. We implemented this GPO at the domain level to inherit all the way down through the layers of the OU structure to each user. However, we needed the management department to receive 8 gigabytes of storage. We managed this by creating global groups with all of the management users throughout the forest, and we linked it to the GPO, we linked the GPO to the Kansas City Executive Management OU. We used security filtering to specify that only the all management global group will be linked to it and not the executive staff group that is also located in that OU. So again, the group policy only applies to those within the all managers global group. So now that I have explained the GPO structure, I'll hand it off to Nick so he can tell you how we're going to back up all of these users, files, and folders.
Thank you, Miranda. Excellent presentation on GPOs. It is absolutely paramount to have a good understanding of a network's impact on productivity and security within your work environment. My name is Nicholas Stebbins. I'm here to tell you a little bit about the shadow copy and backup features. We're going to begin with shadow copy, also known as volume snapshot service. And it allows us to take a snapshot of a shared file or folder up to 64 times to recover previous versions. Say your executive gets click happy in his office and ends up deleting a file or folder. As opposed to getting out your full backup disk to try and recover that individual file or folder, we're able to go through the shadow copy service and recover a previous version of it. By default, the shadow copy service takes a snapshot twice daily, Monday through Friday. We're going to change that default to better align with our backup service to 4 times daily. Backups are extremely important in the recovery of lost files. And Windows Server 2012 R2 comes with the Windows Server Backup feature. The Windows Server Backup feature is used to create backup files of all volumes, select volumes, the system state, or specific files and folders. A full backup will be conducted every 2 weeks, and an incremental backup on-site 7 days a week, and will be stored on a network share, on member server 2, excuse me. Now that TCP/NET has given you a better understanding of the internal workings of our network, I would like to hand you off to our routing team led by Henry Reyes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick, for the presentation. Hello, my name is Henry Reyes. Today I'll be talking about RAS, Remote Desktop, and Remote Assist. RAS stands for Routing and Remote Access. This allows your remote users to connect to your organization's network. Allowing this feature on the server makes it a gateway for remote desktop and remote assistance. Remote desktop is where the IT administrator logs in with his or her credentials, taking control of the desktop, essentially logging off the user. In remote assistance, though, both the user and the admin are on the desktop. As these sessions are encrypted, an encrypted password, also called an invite, is sent via a shared folder if they're both on the same network. If not, they'll be sent via an email. For this to be able to work, they would be needing routers. Routers manage the flow between networks and direct incoming and outgoing packets. For easier connection, we implemented static routes between each location. Now, routers can come and be used in hardware or software base, or a combination of both. The difference between a hardware and a hardware router handles heavier routing demands. A software handles lighter loads, and it's more cost-effective. An RAS server provides two different types of remote access connections: dial-up and virtual private networking. And with this, I will pass it to Mr. Lee, who will talk more about VPN and Windows Firewall.
Hello, my name is Lee Lineweber, and as Henry said, I'll be covering virtual private networks and the Windows Firewall. A virtual private network, or VPN, allows access to a private network over a public one, such as the internet. VPN connections will allow our remote users to access the internal VPN server, which will route traffic between the two. And once the connection has been made, the client will have access to internal resources as if they were physically plugged into the internal network. Now, to ensure security during these VPN connections, we'll be using a tunneling protocol called L2TP IPsec with a pre-shared key. We chose this tunneling protocol not just for its security, but for its connection speed over PPTP, SSTP, and IKE version 2. Now, tunneling allows your internet traffic to swaddle itself in the security that L2TP IPsec provides, making your internet traffic harder to intercept and read. Now, L2TP uses a user datagram protocol, which provides a faster connection speed over the TCP-based ones. However, L2TP does not provide its own security, and that is why it has to be integrated with IPsec. And IPsec is a security extension of the Internet Protocol, and that enforces, and what that does is first encrypts the data and then enforces authentication between the VPN server and the client machine. And that authentication is known as the pre-shared key. And the pre-shared key is nothing more than a common password that is pre-configured on the VPN server and the client machine. And once that is configured, the user has to enter that pre-shared key prior to gaining access through our firewall into our internal network. Now, the firewall is a network security system that is either hardware or software based, and it controls all inbound and outbound traffic based on a set of rules. So you can think of the firewall as a giant robot guardian that is tasked to provide security on 65,535 ports. And everything that goes in and out of the computer has to use these doors. And all programs and features that we enable use a certain set of these doors. Now, you can decide what programs to send and receive information by telling the robot guardian what doors to keep open or what doors to keep locked at all times. And by doing so, you set these inbound and outbound rules. For example, an inbound rule is created by telling the robot guardian to open port 1701 to allow our TCP/IP IPsec packets to traverse through our firewall to allow our VPN connections. And there are times rules are automatically created by adding or modifying Windows features. By enabling the remote desktop connections, we open port 3389. Now, the firewall and connection security rules can be defined locally on the machine, or they can be implemented through a large number of machines via group policy. And on that, I would like to bring Terry back up for closing remarks.
Thank you, Lee. And thank you, team, for the presentation. Very good information. As you've heard about the two networks, you've been given enough information to make a decision to allow us to choose the network and implement the network. So with that being said, TCP Network Group is ready to take any questions.
You guys got it.